Rewind-A-Dynamite from the post-wrestling site. AEW, lighting up the fuse. Sit back and enjoy the bubbly as we hear from Jon and Wai Ting. Where we're going, we don't need roads. And if the buck stops here, this thing might blow. Everything you hear are opinions of the show. And if you don't like it, go to the forums and let them know.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Rewind-A-Dynamite. It's John Pollock here with Wai Ting. An extremely busy and extremely awful day in wrestling in general. We're going to be speaking about Off the Top. Wai, how are you doing tonight?
Better than a lot of people.
Yes.
Yeah,
we're just going to dive right into things. Obviously, the biggest story today and one in recent memory is the WWE undergoing what would be the largest day of cuts, I would say, in their history. I mean, we have really gotten away from those days where you would get those Friday bulk releases, but nothing I can recall ever coming close to this level that has decimated seems like too strong of a word, but in terms of volume, it's just unprecedented of this amount of people that were either released or furloughed as a response, the WWE's response to what they're undergoing, which, I mean, that in and of itself, I think, brings about closer analysis, because this is not a fully formed picture. I think that we can analyze this because so much of this, to me, is part and parcel with what is the status of these television contracts. Do you feel similar way?
Absolutely. I guess without knowing the specifics, it's hard to say exactly, but I mean, I'm sure everything is connected with it, whatever their financial ecosystem is. I'm sure there'll be plenty of reasons to come, but I mean, at the forefront, of course, is their main, driver of their core finances, and that's their TV deals.
That's it. And to me, it's three options that this comes down to. Number one is they're being paid all of their television rights, as you would imagine, and you can't at all justify what is being done here if that's the case. That is their core revenue driver. They were on pace this year to have their biggest, most profitable year, and even with all of the pandemic going on, if those television rights are being paid in full, there's nothing to suggest they cannot hit that marker. So that's one option.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Please continue.
Let me just outline them, and then please give me your feedback. Number two would be either Fox, NBC, Universal, or both wanting to go back to the table and renegotiate these rights. That would be kind of in the middle. And then the most extreme one would be in somehow that they cannot pay them at all at this point, which would disqualify the idea of continuing with your programming at this point. So I don't know what the situation is. I don't think anyone has. I've certainly, inquired. I don't think Fox and NBC Universal are going to be necessarily disclosing this, but I will say for next week's quarterly investors call, that has to be top of mind from all of these investors, and WWE having to paint a picture of what is our financial outlook for 2020. But please give me your thoughts.
Well, I mean, I think it's absolutely right to consider what the TV deals, how that might have affected these decisions. At the same time, I don't completely discount the fact that this is simply the WWE wanting to, slim down its roster and perhaps, seeing an opportunity to do that, regardless of who knows, I think, what the status of those deals currently are.
You feel that even the TV rights being 100%, that this is still a measure that they're taking?
I think it's at least possible, because ultimately, the money that they're saving by cutting these talents, I don't think will make that big of a difference if they lost out on that TV, those TV contracts. I think I'm willing to consider anything, and I can't really pinpoint, and say that one thing is the reason why several people are out of work. I think to me, it's become pretty clear that their talent roster has been pretty bloated for quite a while, and
that's their doing. They have stockpiled that talent. That is completely on them.
Yes.
And they have been paying exorbitant amounts to retain talent and bench them in many cases.
And I think an opportunity to. We're also talking about a landscape right now where I think that pressure to retain people is certainly not there. You don't have any wrestling competition outside of AEW right now, who clearly, I don't think they would be. There's no danger right now for any of these talents to show up on another show to, become superstars, because nobody is really making superstars at the moment. So there are a number of factors involved, and I think people can speculate, but unless you're really Vince McMahon, I suppose we can only really speculate for the time being.
Here are some numbers, okay? So for 2019, their core content rights were listed at $348.6 million, and those would escalate because that only includes one full quarter of the new Fox deal and the new contract with NBC Universal for Raw. So, multiply that by 4 full quarters of those new contracts in 2020. Those rights were going to go that much higher. Free cash flow in the end of the fourth quarter last year was just over $106 million as well. And projections that is something here, is the WWE simply trying to meet their projections for shareholders. They listed for 2020 projected OIBDA between $250 and $300 million for the year, and that was tempered with Vince McMahon stating it could be higher because of this potential deal, for this over-the-top deal that they were touting right after the loss of George Barrios and Michelle Wilson. My point in all of this is that, yes, this is a company that is beholden to shareholders. We are also going through a pandemic at this point, and the WWE is in a position, this is very much affordable. This is something that these cuts right now, they are certainly just slashing all potential cost at this point, and it's hard to get a full picture of it when we don't know what the situation is with the television rights. But that said, Brandon Howard, who we're going to be having on the show on Thursday on the Hangout, he did this study about a week or so ago looking at the prospect of the WWE not being able to, like, this empty arena business lasting the entire year, and that was contingent on the rights fees staying in place, that they could still hit record profits this year, like a record level of operating income, even in the empty arena era at this point. And when we look at, they have been producing these shows, that's the part that is somewhat conflicting, is if your argument is that these shows are being done because of the television rights, then we can't also justify these cuts because of the television rights that have been impacted. Like, something has to give here. Either we have been doing these live shows when television rights are compromised, or we're making these cuts when there have been no issue with the television rights so far. So that, to me, is the major question, and I can't give like my full analysis without knowing the answer to that of what is the state of Fox and NBC Universal in this whole thing that are keeping very quiet on this.
Well, I think we know that a number of the revenue streams are going to be cut off throughout this period, and I think trying to recoup that in the form of cuts to salaried employees, and also just independent contracted employees.
What are we looking at? Ticket sales, merchandise. Those are two that have been hit severely. Mm-hmm. But that is, in the grand scheme of things, like, again, we go back, like, if they are being paid for their television right now, that's a moot point in the grand scheme of what their profit and loss sheet is going to reflect this year.
Okay. Yeah. I suppose, to me, it's still, what is in it for them to retain an Aiden English or a Sarah Logan or a Mike Chioda or an EC3?
The same thing in signing all of these people when it was absolutely imperative that they sign Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows to long-term deals, that they would not let Mike Bennett leave and get out of his deal, that they would, they signed all of these people. And now in the midst of a pandemic, and listen, people are going to have different opinions of what the responsibility is of a company in this situation. But I think that those expectations are gradual when it comes to what is the function of your profitability? Profitability is designed to give you that much more leverage and to be nimble in these times, that you have that ability to do what you would like with it. And if you feel that there is a responsibility to your independent contractors, to your employees during this period, some of which who have been going on the road at this point and making sure that these contracts and these programming commitments are being fulfilled, and you're cutting them at a point where it's not a case of just simply, pick myself up and go to another company. There is nobody that is going to be in a deep hiring phase at the moment and for the foreseeable future. All I'm saying is that in this instance, and Dana White may very well be called a hypocrite later this year, but as of now has stated that there will be no cuts to the UFC, and they are in a far more less nimble position than WWE is to make sure that they can make payroll. This is not a company that is contingent on whether they are going to be profitable or lose money this year. That is pretty much out of the question at this point. It is just a question of how profitable will we be and what are the expectations that the stock market will have on us during a global pandemic.
Certainly, yeah. And I feel like that's more so the bottom line, in my opinion, of what's going on here. I think everything that you hear, especially prior to these quarterly reports, whether it be Vince McMahon touting a new over-the-top deal, or in this case, trimming the roster so that they can promote that they've really lessened and really whittled down the company into its essential staff members. I think everything to me is to just inspire, positive growth in the stock, and to tell people that we are making changes so that people should have confidence in us that we are doing the best we can to make this as profitable a company as possible. And, that comes with perhaps doing what they can to beat expectations. You're right. Without, I think, knowing further details, it's really hard to say. I guess it's hard for me to picture that, releasing, Alexander Jaksic would have any sort of impact at all, on, something as big as a NBC or a Fox deal being in jeopardy.
No, but it's the totality. I mean, you're looking at, the bottom rung here that has been let go, but this is Kurt Angle. This is a significant portion of your producers that have been furloughed in all of this. I mean, this is unlike any, we saw in, past generations, or at least past years, the post-Mania cuts that would come. Nothing like this. This is enormous. Mm-hmm. And I don't expect that shareholders are necessarily going to be feeling that the WWE is, above a certain level. I don't know if they hold them to that level. But I will say that during this pandemic, when we are seeing other leagues across the board that are avoiding this, that we're seeing instances like Endeavor, where the heads of Endeavor are giving up their salaries at this point. And there was outlined here that there would be executive salary reductions as well in all of this. I think it's just, you look at this and here are the workers on the front lines that are ultimately paying this price, many of which have been on the road during this time, that don't have any kind of representation either, that you have to look at this overall, that is there... let's go back to, the Jamal Khashoggi story and the WWE's persistence to go forward with that show. What was the result? That was a a corporate-minded decision that we are putting profitability ahead of this awful event that has occurred, this murder, and the stock went down significantly at that point. Like that was Wall Street saying this is in bad taste. And I think that at times we just dismiss that ethics in all of this is completely discounted when it comes to the stock price, and that's not always the case at this point. My bottom line here, and I'll pass it off to you, is this is affordable for WWE.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah. I mean, when we talk about, this impacting the professional wrestling industry, the one company that really could bear all of this without cutting anybody would be the WWE. Now, of course, that's, even if, again, anyway, we'll talk more about this with Brandon, who maybe is a bit more in tune with some of the specifics. But I mean, just on the note of the stock, it went up at close today.
It closed at just over $38 today?
38.9.
So we should go through all of the names here, and this is quite the list. So here is the latest, if you are not familiar with all the names that were either cut or furloughed today. Those that are not familiar with furloughed, it's essentially an unpaid leave with the potential of a return. And that seems to be the category that the producers have found themselves in. So there is that potential that when things get back to normal, that you could see some of those producers brought back. We will see. But of those names that the WWE announced today, Kurt Angle, Aiden English, Drake Maverick, Heath Slater, Leo Rush, Carl Anderson, Eric Young, Luke Gallows, Kurt Hawkins, EC3, Mike Chioda, Sarah Logan, Eric Rowan, Primo and Epico, Mike and Maria, Zack Ryder, No Way Jose, Rusev, and then there have also been NXT cuts, but they are not announcing the NXT cuts, so it's somewhat trickling out those that are disclosing it on their own. So ones we are aware of: MJ Jenkins, Deonna Purrazzo, Alexander Joksic, Jerry Soto, who was a member of the Spanish announce team, and Josiah Williams as well. In addition to that, Mike Johnson has just added 3 coaches from NXT in Kendo Kashin, Serena Deeb, and Ace Steel as well, coaches at NXT. I would imagine we're going to see more NXT names trickling out, and it just seems like it's being left to them to disclose that they have been let go, because WWE is not including them in their master list on the website. But this is a stunning amount of people, Way.
Yeah, and to add to that, the 9 producers that have been furloughed, according to PW Insider, are Shane Helms, Lance Storm, Billy Kidman, Mike Rotunda, David Finlay, Pat Buck, Sean Davari, Scott Armstrong, and Sarah Stock.
It has to be an incredibly scary time for a lot of these individuals that, in the worst cases that we have seen in the past, at the very least, it's a new world that you're going out to, whether it be independents, whether it's Japan, whether it is TNA, Ring of Honor. Right now, Way, it's the great unknown. You don't have that immediate chance to just jump somewhere, and I would assume that there are 90-day no-competes for some of these as well, so there might be a bit of a cushion, but it's not as though you can plot out your next landing spot after this either, because all of these companies are feeling this at this point. They have their own rosters that I think are going to take their priority to make sure they can take care of them. Matt Taven just did an interview today mentioning that ROH they're paying their performers right now, their contracted performers throughout this whole time, even though they are not producing shows. So I think you have to look at a whole too of like the wrestling industry and who are trying to take care of their performers. And for many that are so much that don't have these gigantic television deals, and many that rely on producing live events that they cannot produce at this point.
For sure. Yeah. That I think just makes WWE look worse. I mean, but at the same time, they are certainly the company, who have the much larger roster of any of the other ones. They're also the company that makes a lot more money than all of the other ones. So, I don't know where you decide to fall on that. Let's also mention that Andrea Listenberger, who was one of the writers, and somebody who reportedly has been responsible for the Otis and Mandy storyline, she was also let go, or at least she informed the world that she was let go. And of course, there are plenty of other people that are probably let go right now that we don't even know about. So maybe in the days to come, we will find out more.
Yes, that's a whole other point of all this, is the behind the scenes people. And I mean, how often do we watch these programs and talk about the WWE production team? But I think you would be struggling to name 10 people that are part of the WWE production team. Mm-hmm. And that to me is an unfortunate part in all of this. Very talented people that are out of work, and they're not known, and they don't get that credit. So keep those people in mind as well.
Certainly. Yeah. And, you know, I'm not really so concerned, honestly, about a Rusev, who I feel like will land on his feet perfectly fine. But, you know, a writer, for instance, who people don't know about, it might be a bit tougher for somebody like that to find work after this. It's so funny, John, because it wasn't really that long ago when we're hearing about talents trying to get released. You know, even just as recently as like last week, we were talking about the Revival, who are seemingly incredibly happy to like be released. But obviously the world is very different right now. And, you know, I don't dispute the fact, though, that maybe some of these talents, I don't know, given the circumstances, it's really hard to say. But some of them, I feel like I almost get the sense that, you know, it's almost like a bad relationship that they found themselves stuck in, that, you know, nobody really wanted to break up, or at least they wanted to break up, but the other person wouldn't let them leave. And now they're almost forced to break up. And I almost like wonder if there's a sense of elation amongst some of these talents. But then you see videos from a guy like Drake Maverick, who just heartbreakingly, you know, recorded his, like, you know, immediate reaction to getting released. And you can tell that for many of these talents, you know, being a part of this company was just it was a childhood dream. Being able to, you know, even play a role like Drake Maverick did, doing the 24/7 title thing like that, to him seemed like it meant the world. And your heart breaks, certainly, you know, for people like that who, I mean, if there was any sort of like, I don't know, career vision that they might have had, it certainly was derailed today. So that always sucks.
Yeah, had this been just if everything was operating as usual, like, first of all, we would not see this level of cuts, but let's say we saw 10 cuts after WrestleMania, everything's going fine. Certainly there would still be the same criticism of WWE cutting people when they're just swimming in profits. And I would say, like, yeah, maybe some of them, they're just happy to be free and now they can go elsewhere. I don't think that is the case in this climate. I think these people have to be at the very least concerned about where my next paycheck is coming, because it's not like saying, okay, I have a 90-day no compete. In 90 days, I'll have Japan, I'll have Impact, I'll have AEW. We don't know that at all. It's not even the case of these companies being able to run in 90 days. It's what is the financial damage they are incurring on a weekly basis. And when they can finally get back to running shows, is hiring going to be of the utmost priority? It may just simply be like you are going to be struggling to keep working. And is it going to be independents that are your options? Like, how many full-time jobs are going to be available in professional wrestling 6 months from now versus 6 months ago?
Definitely. It's a question that I don't think anybody really can answer at the moment, because we don't know when that'll be. Could be 6 months, could be less, could be more. I am curious to see, you know, in the downtime, what somebody like, let's say a Rusev, or maybe somebody like an EC3, who I really felt like even just upon this news immediately seemed to, like, I don't know if he like just set up a DSLR himself or got a professional camera guy or what. He seemed to have a promo ready to go. Like, he seemed to have a whole character bio and synopsis ready to go. So I think, like, you know, you're going to get guys who will be inspired now more than ever to, like, you know, prove the world wrong. Now they have a bit of a chip on their shoulder. You didn't use me. You let me go. Well, I'm going to, you know, Drew McIntyre you. Maybe anyway. I am curious to see that, but like for a majority of these names, I don't know. Their future is certainly in question.
Yeah. I don't know how much more to add to all of this. We're going to speak to Brandon Howard about this on Thursday to chat about kind of just the whole financial picture of the company and maybe go through potential scenarios of what is ultimately going to be, to me, coming down to the television rights situation. I think that is the $1 million, or should I say the $500 million question of where those rights fees, like if it's being paid in full, if it's a renegotiation, if it's something else. So we'll chat with Brandon about that more on Thursday, but I'll just convey that like I have spoken to a lot of people in the company today, and this just seemed like this was the worst day imaginable. And it's something that it's awful for the people that are no longer with the company. That goes without saying. It is also devastating for the ones that are still there and are seeing these people that they are with, sometimes more than their families, that is completely just thrown out the window. And for many of them, like not even getting to see them one final time. They've been, not at shows together or whatnot. It just sounds like this was an incredibly, incredibly awful day in WWE, and that's probably the understatement of this show.
And it's scary to think that it might not be over.
That's another point in all of this is I go back to when you and I had to experience this at our former employer, and it was going through a round of cuts and the meeting afterwards to address everybody. The warning was, we may not be done yet, and in 6 months may have to go through all of this again. And that's another element to all of this is if the WWE is dead set on meeting a certain level of expectation, it's like, what is that expectation level? And in this COVID-19 world, 6 months from now, if they continue to slash costs.
Well, the fact that there are so few NXT names officially recognized on this thing, I mean, and the fact that I feel like more. I just get the feeling more is to come, unfortunately.
Do you see this being an ultimate shift in, like, are we gone from the days of seeing like these mid to lower tier, lower card performers getting these enormous deals? Are those out the window at this point?
In the immediate future, yeah, I would absolutely say so. I think a lesson learned from all this is that whatever hoarding of talent is not just, I think, financially, irresponsible. I think creatively it's irresponsible. It's resulted in a lot of people that have largely had unsatisfying careers, I would say. A lot of people being sold false hope that one day they will become a WrestleMania main eventer, and then ultimately wasting years of their careers. Not to say the alternative is that much brighter of like, I suppose not just, I don't know, living paycheck to paycheck off of like your independent bookings. I mean, I whatever. That's another debate, but I would hope that the WWE would learn from something like this where did it really make that big a difference? Having like hiring the several people that they had, keeping AEW or whoever in New Japan or whoever from getting them. It to me made no difference on this war that they've been fighting.
Yeah, you really do have to take a step back and you look at, just the lack of representation that these performers have. And when we talk about what these, like, regardless of what your opinion has been about these shows going forward, the justification has always been that the WWE is fulfilling these television contracts. And let's never forget that the people that were at the front lines going to the greatest amount of risk, going to these shows and exposing themselves to, they didn't know, like, for all the precautions you can take, they were putting themselves at risk and were about to do so weekly. And some will continue to do weekly. And their share in those television contracts is absolutely nothing.
Dude, Sarah Logan just worked Raw.
No Way Jose just worked on Raw.
If you ask them, I mean, somebody like No Way Jose, I mean, in the video he released, he says if he knew it was going to be his last match, he would have taken it in a lot more. On many levels, but that's the thing. All wrestlers are grateful for the opportunity. And that's the shitty part, because that means they'll be able to be exploited. But I mean, these are guys who are also taking risk, traveling in a climate where people shouldn't be traveling. And then, you know, next day you find out that you're released. I mean, it's a shitty situation. And listen, this is all coming in the midst of a shit storm that the WWE has already been through. It feels like every time we go on air, John, there's just like another terrible thing about this company that we're talking about. Like, just not even a week ago, we're talking about their first positive case. And then it's the thing with the live TVs. And then it's like, you know, something like Jerry Lawler being president at a show. And then, of course, today it's this. It's just, man, it's one thing after another.
It's nonstop. And I just feel, I feel awful for all of the talent and the producers and the writers, everybody affected. But there is an extra level of just shock. Shock is not even the word, of the ones that were front and center doing these shows, and doing so because whether it was, you know, this is, we're part of the team and our leader is moving forward, so it's all systems go, we're going to do these shows, and this is what happens. I think that's really, that's a real tough pill to swallow if you were one of those people that were involved in any of these shows, and then you get that caller text today.
It's a shitty situation. Yeah.
So we're going to move on because there are several other stories. Let's stay in WWE because there's been some great reporting about what has been going down in Orange County. John Elba has been doing reporting for My News 13 down in Florida. He actually did a podcast with a friend of the show, Josh Nason, at the Wrestling Observer site talking about this. But it's going over the executive order that was dated April 9th and that has essentially allowed for sports with a national audience that are closed off to the public to be able to run within the state of Florida. And this is kind of just putting different pieces together. Number one is the fact that the same day that this executive order was dated, April 9th, was the day that Linda McMahon's American First Action PAC was committing or announcing that they were committing $18.5 million in spending in the Orlando and Tampa markets. And of course, the Action PAC, they are a spokesman for the Action PAC spoke to ABC denying this is nothing more than a coincidence. Ron DeSantis is also stating that one didn't have anything to do with the other, and it very well may not have one to do with the other. It may be a coincidence, but I think we do have to list that as, you know, a fact that is out there, the timing of this all. Ron DeSantis has claimed that the WWE running is critical to Florida's economy, and has not really elaborated on what that means. I mean, is there some financial kickback for the state in running these shows? Is this a long-term play that they do not want to jeopardize a WrestleMania going elsewhere in 2 years? Which, I mean, even now, the mayor of LA is talking about large-scale events that may not happen until next year, and it's not going to be too far before you're looking at, will WrestleMania in California be viable? That has been a state that, I mean, we have seen from the UFC's track record so far. That is a state that has been extremely cautious in this whole pandemic as well.
It's fucking crazy to me that we have world leaders that are, oh man, I mean... And listen, maybe these are two separate instances, but I'm just laying out these facts. Sure.
And then I think the most telling here is that they contacted the sheriff's office in Orange County, who said they were called several times to the WWE PC, quote, over the past few weeks. And the WWE were told that you are not in compliance with the existing executive order and were to shut down. And we know they did not shut down any of these shows. The sheriff's office was called again this past Monday, which they were doing Raw. And then the new executive order was shown and they were allowed to run. And that was dated April 9th. And that's very strange, the timing, because this executive order, this new version, was introduced, it's dated April 9th. I did not see anyone talking about this thing until Monday. It was like that was news to everyone until the mayor of Orange County, Jerry Demings, revealed that. And I mean, for that to drop on last Thursday and no one is aware of this thing until Monday. Anyway, so that's where it is. But yes, like there were complaints and the sheriff's office stating that they even told WWE, you're not in compliance and you are to shut down. And I don't know what happened that ultimately they did not shut down, but it obviously was either something they could not enforce or whatever the other options were. They ran the shows.
I mean, clearly, I think they feel like they have, I think, a level of power that seems to be above the authorities. And again, it's crazy to me that, you know, a company with that level of power and that level of resources has to justify releasing low-level talent.
Yeah, it's this is not a bright chapter in the history of the WWE this past month.
No, not at all. Terrible. And the shitty thing is that I feel like with all of their bad stories, I don't know how I feel like they'll just get away with it. You know, I think we'll all move on because they're the only game in town, or at least, you know, the biggest game in town. And in a year's time, you know, will this even be brought up? Will things really change?
What repercussions are they going through now? You just mentioned their stock price. They, you know, the TV rights is a big question mark of what is going on there. But other than that, I mean, yes, they're getting slammed in the press, but they don't react to that. They're running their shows. They have this new executive order. They've got the governor backing them. They've got the president of the United States identifying the great Vince McMahon in his press briefings. It's like they are, to me, as insulated as anybody to have no concern about continuing to run all of their shows. They have talent that, I mean, as always, we look at these cases of, is this the seminal moment that talent put their foot down? And I'm sorry, but I don't feel that's a realistic outcome in all of this of talent saying enough is enough.
Oh, it's not a system that's built for that whatsoever. You know, and I think they understand that as long as they treat their top stars well, that possibility I don't think exists.
We go over to Japan, and this was an interesting story today. All these figures from various Japanese promotions got together with Hiroshi Hase, who is the Japanese Minister of Education, Culture, Sports, Science, and Technology. The meeting was held at Tokyo's Lower Assembly Hall, and it featured the likes of Hiroshi Tanahashi, Naoki Sugabayashi, the chairman of New Japan, Takaki Kadani, representatives from All Japan, DDT, Noah, Mayu Iwatani was there from Stardom, from the Diana promotion, Tokyo Joshi Pro, like all these different representatives. And in it, they made a formal proposal asking for testing kits for performers and also compensation for contracted wrestlers who are not able to perform at the moment. And in one of the, like, just look at this difference in reaction here. This was Hiroshi Tanahashi's quote. He said, "While events have been canceled, our wrestlers have been training diligently and maintaining their focus for an eventual return. Yes, not being able to wrestle does make a lot of us concerned for our livelihoods, but in the world of sports, be that baseball, soccer, or sumo, I feel that professional wrestling should be the anchor. I think it should be acceptable for professional wrestling to be the last sport to return to full activity. I want people to know that when professional wrestling is back, then and only then, it truly means that Japanese entertainment has properly recovered." They are arguing for the most amount of time and most amount of caution aimed at their industry.
You know, it's very noble to hear Tanahashi and, you know, by extension, I think New Japan say something like that. I do wonder if that sentiment would be agreed by some of the smaller promotions that, you know, basically are forced to, like, face being shut down altogether if they don't run, if they wait that long. But that said, I think, you know...
This is pretty detrimental to New Japan. I'm not saying, like, they're in the position of, you know, a smaller company like a Tokyo Joshi Pro, but I mean, New Japan, it is still like they are a live event business at their core.
Well, for the sake of comparison, right? Okay, we're talking about the industry leader in Japan who have publicly stated in the form of Hiroshi Tanahashi that they are willing to be the last sport to come back. And you look at the leader in the industry on this side of the world, and really by the entire world, that is the level of, I think, tact that I would expect from a leader, a true leader, to be able to sacrifice themselves and be able to say, even if we're not going to make money, we're going to take care of our talents because we can afford to do it, because we have a lot. We have a lot of resources. And just to kind of see the opposite tact taken by a company like the WWE, who, I mean, I feel like they're more like greedy than like, an independent wrestling promotion who's on the verge of collapse has every right to be. So,
dude, look at name any independent promotion, and that's why I will push back if anyone is stating MMA and professional wrestling are not addressing this. The outliers have been WWE and UFC. It has been the large amount of companies that have stopped. The ROHs, the NWAs, like everyone pretty much at this point now in New Japan, now that you have a state of emergency, it is the few, but it's the biggest that have been continuing.
Well, it's the ones with the resources that can get away with things like buying a fucking island or, whatever else is going on in Florida right now, that have the ability to get away with not following the law. They're the ones that are making the biggest attempts.
And I found out that me and Mayu Iwatani share a very similar event. Both of us, because of this pandemic, had to cancel our birthday parties.
Heartbreaking. Well,
she was supposed to have a birthday party February 19th, and I just 3 weeks later had to cancel my birthday party because of this.
Maybe we can throw a joint party for you and Mayu.
You know what? I might maybe I will seek out Mayu Iwatani and we will get her for the unofficial Mayu Iwatani John Pollock birthday bash.
It makes perfect sense.
Let's continue on down the list. Oh, I feel you are just so tired of this man's name. Dana White is now targeting May the 9th for a return to promoting fights. He has not named a location, although Variety did a big piece on this suggesting that the Apex in Vegas could be a potential venue if the Nevada State Athletic Commission is willing to sanction fights at that time. And of course, pending Disney's approval that the UFC can go forward, they have a golden ticket and a green light to run in Florida. There will be nothing stopping them, and it would not even shock me, Wai, if the UFC ends up, again, this would be contingent on Disney being okay with them going forward. Do you discount the idea of UFC doing a show at the Performance Center?
No, not at all. I mean, I think anything is possible. But if not the Performance Center, then, I think another venue in the state of Florida seems perfect.
I think really it's like reasonable. The state would not be stopping them, so I don't see why other venues would either at that point. It's really concerning that how many people are just dying to follow in the lead of Florida because they're witnessing, they are feeling the pain of this pandemic on a financial level, on a personal level, and it concerns me. Are we going to look back 2 months from now and be saying, what were we thinking? Like if this is, Gavin Newsom gave the quote on the weekend, we don't run the 90-yard dash. And we have to make sure we finish this thing correctly. And I don't think we're at 90 yards yet.
No, not at all. No. It is so. Dude, I really, it's hard for me to like say what's in the minds of like, grown adults that are supposed leaders of the society. I mean, I certainly have the way I look at things, and you know what, like maybe. I mean, people are so convinced that I think their concerns are the right ones. That it seems like it'll be a really difficult battle at this point to convince them otherwise until you start to see the numbers pile up. And the scary thing though, John, is that the numbers are piling up, particularly in Florida, and that doesn't seem to be influencing that much change at all. So what does that tell you?
And I mean, even Anthony Fauci, talking about the theoretic return of sports this summer. This was an interview that he conducted, and he said there's a way of doing it, but outlines that no one can come to the stadium. All of the players, he's talking about regular sports league, all the players put up in big hotels, and they're all surveyed and monitored and tested every single week. But essentially, it's building, like, I don't even want to say an Olympic village, like having a hotel on lockdown where your function is to go to your room, get up, go to the game, and then you come back. And that is the summer of what they're like putting as a timetable. None of this, you're going home and then you're coming back each week. Like, none of that stuff. So, I mean, that puts it into perspective of what risks are being taken now and what the top infectious disease expert in the country is advising.
Yeah, I don't really see that happening for, any of those major leagues. Do you? Like, quarantining essentially an entire league of players to play out?
Well, here's the deal.
Season?
They all have, it's not going to be a case of going to name the baseball player and the baseball player is deciding on his own. It's going to be done as a collective decision because they have a players association that is going to have their interests first and foremost and not the leagues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That is a big difference. I don't think any of this is. It's hard to say like how. I don't think it's personally. I don't think it's viable what he's suggesting right now. I mean, it just may be his way of saying this is what's needed in order for this shit to be safe. And until you can do this, none of this shit is safe. So don't even think about it. Maybe that's what he's saying. But I think a big. We need strides in like technology and innovation to really help move things along. And I think much of that comes in the form of testing and widespread testing, easily accessible testing, accurate testing. To implement something like that, like he's suggesting basically testing somebody before every time they take the field, which at this point is completely impossible.
Yeah. Just a few more here. AEW is going to go ahead with their Double or Nothing pay-per-view on in May and have announced it will not be in Las Vegas, but they have not announced a location. It'll be May 23rd. As well, that following Wednesday, they were going to be doing Dynamite from Vegas as well. That will not be happening there. And they have rescheduled for the MGM Grand Garden Arena on May the 29th of 2021. So, I mean, this is going to bring about the debate about AEW. They have taped their television. They are fulfilling their obligations to TNT. Is this, I think this is a step too far, but I also expect that there's going to be a tempered reaction to this in light of today's news, where people are going to look at this as, well, we don't want to see AEW have to do the same things that WWE has done. And therefore they're running a pay-per-view to drive revenue. I think that's going to be the debate here, but I'm still on my side of, if it's not necessary, it should not be done right now. And I don't know if a pay-per-view should be necessary right now.
No, I don't think it is. I mean, that is the argument. I do wonder if it'll be inevitable that these leagues will have to shut down, because the alternative is that we just continue running until this thing still, for how long, however long this thing exists.
Who's going to shut them down? I mean, this can be done in Florida, and I see no leadership in that state that is going to stop this. And when Orange County had deemed this non-essential, well, a conversation with the governor's office changed that. And that's what it comes down to. Unless this governor, Ron DeSantis, has a massive change or he is so pressured, this is going to be the state that you can run these shows in.
Yeah. What I am curious to, consider, and this is, it's kind of morbid and kind of grim, but this is also the reality of what we're dealing about. Like, how would AEW react to its first positive case? God forbid somebody on that roster or within the crew or staff test positive. I mean, and it's, God, I don't want to, it's hard to think about, but at the same time, I want to see what their reaction is. Will they shut things down? Or, I mean, obviously, I guess that would kind of depend on on the amount of spread, but how will they react versus how we've seen WWE react?
I mean, I just have faith in both companies, and maybe that's naive. I would say that AEW, they have been far less, to me, reckless than WWE, but they are not without criticism, by no means.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely. In fact, I would say if you look at the two examples, though, one is far more egregious than the other, but there's certainly criticism to be levied at both.
I actually wouldn't have said that like prior to them deciding to go live. Like, I actually felt like WWE was taking more precautions, not having people ringside. From what we know from Kevin Owens, changing the mats all the time, and we know AEW has been taking a lot of precautions too. But seeing things like Jimmy Havoc stick his fingers down somebody's throat, shit like that. I was actually like, I felt like WWE was doing better, but that of course completely changed once they decided to go live every single week. Once they decided to fly everybody, including backstage interviewers, including Jerry Lawler, to do their shows, and then of course everything after a positive test. Like, should I keep going on? The Linda McMahon stuff, like all of this other stuff. The scales are definitely tipped right now.
Last thing here, we won't go too deep into this. Here are just some ratings. Raw, back to their lowest of the year, 1,913,000 viewers, down 9%. They had a super low first hour, so as a result, the number didn't drop all that significantly throughout the three shows. So I don't know if you look at that as good or bad, but it was their third lowest in modern history, and that's kind of where I'm seeing this leveling off at. So
John, does that tell you that having matches, brand new matches with talent that are flown in versus having taped stuff, or having one less color commentator on the panel or one less backstage interviewer, do any of these things make a difference?
No, it doesn't. I don't think that. If anything, I think the amount of new matches they're doing are driving people off more. It certainly did. I think everyone could tell in my voice on Monday. Like, I just did not get into that show at all. It was just, the atmosphere killed me. And I imagine, like, I don't think this is the lowest they're going to go. I think this, as long as they're doing these shows, I think you're whittling away at this audience week after week. And I don't know what it gets down to. Like, is 1.8 million people the number that will watch Raw on Scramble Vision if they had to on a Monday night? I don't know what the lowest number is, but I don't think we've hit the lowest.
I mean, I think these numbers are going to go down, honestly, regardless. And if they are, why continue to take the risk that you're taking?
Yep. And if you are doing these live tapings every week in order to save your contract, then listen, something is not adding up here. If you're doing all of these live tapings to preserve your television rights, then how do you justify all these cuts? And if you're not getting all of your, if your television contract money has somehow been compromised in all of this, then why in God's name did you not tape all of this stuff? And why are you going live? So there are questions, and we don't have answers right now. Mm-hmm. And just some other ratings notes here real quick. Dark Side of the Ring, the Jimmy Snook episode that we'll talk about on Friday night, 209,000 viewers. And then the FS1 block on Tuesday night, they actually did some pretty strong numbers by FS1 standards for the 3 straight episodes of Ruthless Aggression. They did 226, 302, and 224,000 viewers respectively, and then 161,000 viewers for Backstage that featured Edge and CM Punk, which I didn't see any of. Did you see any of Backstage?
I've only seen certain clips that have popped online of Punk talking about Ronda. Says like Ronda has the crowd in the palm of her hands or something. Basically, he's for it, for the angle. And I believe he also talked about both Braun, like basically both championship programs being too soon right now. So he was just giving some storyline criticism, basically.
What would that show have looked like tonight?
Oh God, what would it look like? I mean, I guess by next week it'll kind of have cooled down.
I thought that yesterday. I was like, what is this show going to look like tonight? Like, when you're avoiding all of this stuff. And then today, I mean, I don't know.
There will be some mention, but like, I mean, how much really like dissection or analysis would you really expect?
All right. We did almost an hour of news, so let's get into Dynamite.
I mean, this really is the bulk of the show. It's what's on everybody's mind.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to kind of blitz through Dynamite here. I'm going to say off the top, I don't know if it was yourself as well. Subconsciously, I enjoyed this show a lot more knowing this was taped weeks ago, and I'm not constantly staring at something that is happening in the moment and wondering about, like, at least that this is weeks away, that this was taped. That these people are there were no cases that came out of this. You're not watching it. I think it's actually, for me at least, and maybe I'm in the minority, it's a detriment watching these shows live with the risk factor as opposed to these taped shows from several weeks ago.
It's hard for me to get into anything knowing that, people are actually being put in greater danger for my entertainment. And absolutely the fact that they even did these tapings, the fact that they're even wrestling itself poses, a higher level of risk. I guess I've always, if you're going to take risk, like, I hope at least it is calculated and only, I hope you're mitigating it as much as you can. And I feel like AEW has demonstrated that, at least through this set of tapings, by trying to bulk shoot as much as they have. I just want it to be economical, and I don't want people's efforts to go completely wasted, which, I mean, this past week with people being flown in and then having their shit canceled, it really was.
Hey, just to bookend the news segment, I would be remiss not to give a massive thank you to Andrew Thomson today. He was on top of everything, and Wednesday was his day for the news, and it turned out to be probably the busiest day of the year, and not a lot of fun news to report on either. So a huge thank you to Andrew for all his efforts today. Okay, the show began with a tape promo with Jake Roberts and Lance Archer, and Roberts cutting a promo that the TNT Championship was made for them because Archer commands attention for TNT, and that belt is a bone, and who wants to take that bone away from this dog? Lance is going to enjoy it. Jake has watched Colt Cabana for years. He's good, but not good enough. Archer was pushed out of this country, had to go make a living in Japan. He's pissed off. He's an animal. Listen to me or regret it. I thought this was one of Jake's better promos. I thought this was a really strong start to the show, and I think Jake has really found his rhythm with Lance Archer as the subject.
Yeah. And I think, I guess knowing perhaps some of what's going on with Jake, as far as I know right now, he is in DDP's,
yes.
What does he call? What is it called?
The accountability crib?
Accountability
is that what he calls
crib.
it?
Yeah, after, some, I guess some, him mentioning that
he was quarantined in a hotel.
Quarantined in a hotel, and I think just, not doing the best, mentally, just from that environment. It makes me feel good to know that he, at least for a time here, was kind of kept busy doing some work, and it tells me that, even in a pre-taped role, hopefully he could still continue to keep busy, which I think a lot of people need right now, but in particular somebody like him. Some of Jake's earlier promos have been rather vague. They sounded really cool, like they're Jake Roberts promos, but none of them have necessarily made me think about Lance Archer all that much until these past couple weeks. And this one in particular, I thought was directly focused on promoting Lance Archer, and I thought it did a really effective job of it.
Yeah, I think he really comes across well in a taped setting as well. Our announcers for the night, the returning Chris Jericho with Tony Schiavone.
Schiavone is what we prefer over Schiavone.
Yeah. Jericho's got to go watch Starrcade 83 maybe for some variations on Schiavone. They tee up the show, including a segment, Chris Jericho and the Bubbly Bunch, with the screens where what I thought was we were going to get like a Zoom conference call with them done in the style of like the Brady Bunch, but that's not exactly what we got, but that's kind of how they set it up here with the graphic.
It was pretty fun. Well, yeah. I mean, this is, I think, part of the creativity that I really enjoy about these particular shows is to see how people can shoot their own video and bring it all together in like pieces that actually are cohesive. And you it's one of the things that I think separates AEW from, a WWE production, is that they are allowing a lot of their guys to shoot their own things and really be creative with their own ideas. And, from what I could tell, this was a good idea that was safe to do.
They did a feature on Colt Cabana. He said that he came in. And
before that, John, sorry to cut you off. They also promoted this AEW Watch Along contest. And I guess this kind of, ties into what I was talking about. And the AEW Watch Along contest is essentially them asking people to send video clips of them watching AEW. And I thought this was also a pretty good new idea to encourage some level of fan interaction without having people in attendance. And, ultimately what this will result in will be a compilation of videos of fans you would expect going crazy watching at home. So it'll hopefully provide some sort of communal atmosphere for your future broadcasts, even if, you don't see the audience in the screens.
Yeah, it was a interesting idea that they came up with. The Cabana feature, he said that he came in, fans had some lowered expectations of him, but he's proving them wrong. He has too been dominant in other countries for the past 15 years, and he's going to come from underneath, show his worth, and he's not looking past Lance Archer. So that was our tournament match in the TNT Championship tournament. Archer comes down, drills this dude that's behind the guardrail, and we don't get an identification on him. He was just a random dude that got knocked out cold and presumably never returned. And Jericho is just identifying Lance Archer. He's a mean man. And Jericho, you can see he is just playing off whatever these guys have. He's there's some boom boom, little bit of the boom boom. And he was just him and Helwani are a really fun team together.
They are, yeah. And I think Jericho really continues to put a priority on giving high energy to his commentary. It's a bit of a contrast, I think, to the heel character that he plays, which, I mean, it fits, but at the same time, it is a slightly, I would say, more exaggerated, more enthusiastic version of it. And I think he realizes that, having a loud, enthusiastic voice helps really mitigate perhaps some of the silence for these empty arena shows.
So Archer rocks him with this short arm clothesline, did a twisting splash out of the corner. Then he misses a splash off the turnbuckle to Cabana, and Cabana fires up with an elbow, a tilt-a-whirl head scissors, and then the flying apple. And Jericho compared his leaping to Super Porky's, and he hit the bionic elbow, and then is met with the pounce, followed by a choke slam, and Lance Archer hits the blackout for the victory. And Lance Archer, busting everyone's tournament brackets, he advances.
Are we doing brackets?
No, but Colt Cabana was certainly not having his New Japan Cup run of last year in this tournament.
No, unfortunately not. I thought it was a good showcase for Archer against an opponent of bigger size than Marco Stunt, obviously. It was not really a competitive match, but it wasn't really meant to be. It was meant to be a showcase.
And fit the story Cabana gave, here I am. I'm underestimated. I know I'm the underdog. They played into that theme and gave him this ability. Can he just, all you're trying to do is give a sliver of doubt. I think that's what you try to do in these situations and then exploit that. So, fine match. Tape segment with Dr. Britt Baker. She has a taped up nose from the attack last week during the match, with Hikaru Shida. And she's in her dental office and has on the paper rules of being a role model. Number 1, always fight fair, because Hikaru Shida didn't. And now she has a deviated septum, and says she kept going even without her encouraging fans cheering her on, but then says, no, I did it all on my own. I'm still the face of this division, so who's the true winner? And she puts on the glove and then takes this syringe and just starts shooting it.
Because she had to get ready for her match.
I guess so. What was she using this syringe for?
I don't know what special. I guess. What is it? Anesthesia?
Maybe she's got an injury and she numbed the pain. Maybe her nose is in throbbing pain, and she had to shoot herself up before the match.
Yeah, I guess. Wasn't that the idea?
I guess so. It's a kind of a It was The Undertaker once where they did that, where he had like some injury he had to go into a match with on some pay-per-view, and the doctor like had to shoot up his elbow. It's like, this is very bizarre for a pro wrestling setting.
Isn't that completely against commission rules?
I would imagine, like, USADA would not approve of this, not after weigh-ins. So,
okay.
Britt Baker continues to be such a tremendous personality.
Yes, she's great.
So all night long, we were going to get previews for the Jake Hager, Jon Moxley match. And all of a sudden, there on my screen, I'm staring at Ariel Helwani previewing this match, calling Jake Hager tougher than a $2 steak as he picked Jake Hager. And this became comedic for many reasons, not the least of which was that like all the MMA people chose Jake Hager, and then all the wrestling guys picked Jon Moxley, with the exception, I guess, of the Inner Circle.
Yeah, right. I didn't expect to see Ariel on Dynamite tonight.
I did not either. I did not know this in advance. Then we had Taz previewing the match and picked Moxley, and we come back from break, and all of a sudden, Taz has like transported himself to UFC in 2004, and he's Mark Lehman, because it is now Technique by Taz as he gives this scientific breakdown of the head and arm choke of Jake Hager using the Gable grip, the judo technique, and this was accompanied by Bellator footage. And as I was watching this, I was just given like how much Bellator was on this show, imagining like that we will see Robin Black on Dynamite before the end of the year.
Oh, we could only hope.
I think it's very possible.
Well, I mean, I thought Taz did a very good version of that level.
Oh, Taz was great. I really liked this segment.
I think Robin would be proud if he saw something like this. You know, just having Taz break down the arm triangle, talking about it's the judo version of it. I think, you know, if you've anytime we've reviewed wrestling from like a 2002, 2003, like I've always been a big fan of Taz's commentary whenever he focuses on the sports aspects of it. And this
or sings.
What?
Or when he sang on commentary.
That too. So maybe we'll get a breakdown of that eventually. But, you know, as far as the sports goes, I mean, AEW took that element of him and basically amplified it by 10 with a breakdown like this. This makes it makes nerds like, you know, you and I go crazy. So I'm such a nerd for like, you know, him focusing on like, you know, the joints and the points of contact and the points of pressure. And it just really makes this feel like it's a big sporting event and a big fight that we're about to see. He talks about Moxley having been done some training in MMA as well. I've really been impressed with Taz within AEW. I am of the opinion that he will eventually be moved to the main broadcast because I think he fits that their desire to deliver sports like presentation really well. You know, all their staff has been really good. Excalibur's been really good. Tony's been really good for what he's done. JR has been really good. But if I had to pick like a favorite color guy, I might actually say Taz right now.
He's fit in very well, like seamlessly with this broadcast team, and it's very much his strength that comes through in this. So he's been a great addition. Cassandra Golden and Britt Baker. Golden had lost her debut match to Hikaru Shida, and Baker super kicks her and then poses on the apron while Golden is tending to her jaw, and then Baker places the teeth on the rope, stomps her just like she did to Yuka Sakazaki, and pinned Golden in a minute 11, and Jericho said she is creating her own patients because she's a businesswoman, so that's why she's destroying teeth.
Would you go to the doctor that happened to break your teeth?
I think I'd hold a grudge, especially for the immediate aftermath backstage.
I guess if she could offer a discount.
Yeah, I would be looking at, I am not going to pay you to fix my teeth. Instead, I might sue you for a blatant infraction of the rules here.
I don't know if you... I mean,
why don't these people wear mouth guards against Britt Baker? I mean, the secret's out now what the game plan is.
It's true. Yeah, no, I think, you know, perhaps this was a further rehabbing of Britt Baker, I suppose, after last week. It made her look dangerous, certainly with this jawbreak spot. Then we had comedian Ron Funches and Mike Goldberg. Funches picked Moxley, and Mike Goldberg is
choosing Jake Hager. Here we go.
Yes.
I mean, he's just got all his lines ready. He knows exactly what the people want from Mike Goldberg.
What could have been at one point, John, your lead Raw commentator?
He would have been the lead commentator if everything had gone according to WWE's plan, where that October 2005 debut on the USA Network, Mike Goldberg would have come to Raw, replacing Jim Ross, and would have had a new name because that was when they did not like Bill Goldberg. So he would have been Mike Funches.
Perhaps, yeah.
God, did that man make the better career choice in 2005?
I think so.
I think he would have lasted a year tops on that broadcast and would have hated it by the end. Santana's at home. This is the Bubbly bunch. So we start with Santana. He's making fun of the Young Bucks. We cut to Ortiz, then to Sammy Guevara, who's lifting weights and then just throws it away and then starts counting in Spanish on the heavy bag. And it's just going from one member to the next. Jake Hager is by his pool with his kids and goes Vince Vaughn with the earmuffs as he has the kids cover their ears as he says, "I'm going to beat the shit out of Jon Moxley." I think Jake Hager has kind of found himself as he's this legitimate badass, but he's also like Biff Tannen, like high school jock.
I think they've all found their personality. That's really been one of the most impressive things about this group is that they not only seem to, have good in-ring chemistry, but they have like good comedic chemistry with each other, good on-air chemistry, and everybody's personality has been able to shine in their short incarnation.
Santana has been very underrated. I mean, that guy to me has become a really great promo. From the moment we heard him do that great one into the camera a few months ago, like that's a guy who has just shown so much personality. Yeah, I know.
All of them. Yeah. Like they're like, like the Spice Girls. Like everybody,
exactly like the Spice Girls. Yes.
Everybody, on their own, you can identify, and everybody might have their own favorite, but when they come together, I mean, it's 5 become 1.
Okay. It's okay. So Ginger would be
Jericho.
Okay. Jericho Hallowell.
Okay, sure. Yep, that works.
Okay. Scary would be Ortiz.
Yeah, that works too.
Okay. Baby Spice.
I think Santana is definitely a bit of a posh.
Santana is definitely posh. 100%.
Sammy would be Baby Spice.
Sammy, okay, as Baby Spice, and that would leave Hager as Sporty Spice. I mean, that is a pretty fucking good analogy.
It's perfect.
Man, that is amazing.
Almost as good as your Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump analogy to Carol Baskin and Joe Exotic.
Yeah. It's it definitely. I have to be in the right mood to do my my political thoughts because then I always get the backlash from people the next day. All right, well that was great actually. The Spice Girls. Next we had Sammy Guevara against the former Sugar Dunkerton, now Shug D, and man, Shivani and Jericho, they had no idea what this guy's name was.
Suge.
Suged. Sug Ed. Jericho corrects Dasha Gonzalez for calling Guevara a Spanish god. He is the Spanish god. And then they battle over the pronunciation of Shug. And then Guevara does his delayed vertical suplex. I mean, this is really all just Sammy Guevara being the cocky heel. Jericho takes credit for recruiting him to AEW. And then he steps on Shug D doing the Jericho pose with the flex and the 1 foot on top. And then a flying knee off the rope and a knee strike off of his shoulders for the win in 6 minutes, with Jericho saying how he has coached him and he would have been winning with a shooting star press months ago. Now he's winning with a knee to the face.
Yeah. To me, this was like, a big debut of sorts for the newly christened Pineapple Pete, who I think has quickly become a star jobber just based off of that name alone.
Pineapple Pete. They maybe should have just gone with that.
I mean, I think unofficially that's what his name will be.
Guevara says the spoiler is that he's going to beat the shit out of Darby Allin, which apparently they have no limit when it comes to shit drops on this. He's going to beat him in the tournament. Then he continues to attack Shug D, and Darby runs in, chasing him away. And that will be our match next week in the rematch from Revolution, which was a hell of a match for the short time that they had.
Yes, it was.
Then we had Big Jon McCarthy. He didn't make it to the Brawl for All, but he made it to AEW Dynamite. He's picking Jake Hager by submission, and man, I have listened to Jon McCarthy break down probably 500 fights in my life. He was trying really hard to convey his enthusiasm for a match that I don't think there's a prayer he watched.
Oh, God, yeah. Do you feel like is there a reason? I mean, obviously because of Jake Hager connection, but do you think that they reached out to any UFC personalities, or is there no possibility of that?
It's so weird. Like, obviously, with Jake Hager working with Bellator, they're just relying exclusively on Bellator fighters and representatives.
Right.
And then, of course, Ariel from ESPN. But what's so interesting is that TNT has a relationship with one championship, but that's they're just focusing on Bellator. And I guess because these people can actually speak about Jake Hager, because I will guarantee you Jon McCarthy is not aware, and Josh Thomson don't know anything else about Jon Moxley or anyone else on this roster.
Sure, right. I was waiting for Randy, actually.
Yeah, they could have been. It's just so funny because if you listen to Jon McCarthy and Josh Thompson's podcast, like Josh Thomson like rails on pro wrestling, like he hates it, and to see him on here like just feigning excitement over something that, my God, was not something I can imagine he volunteered for, but I'm sure it was just offered and didn't turn it down. Excalibur then says if this was a steel cage match, it might favor Jake Hager, but it's not. In a street fight environment, he has to go with Jon Moxley. Definitely the most technical breakdown outside of Taz that we got on this show.
Mm-hmm.
Chuck Taylor, Kip Sabian. We had Penelope Ford and Orange Cassidy out. Sabian hit a legit European uppercut, they noted, because he's from Europe. Michinoku Driver is hit by Chuck Taylor that Jericho says he is now calling the Chuck E. Cheese, and that Taylor should take that. Then they showed a shot of Billy Gunn next to Austin Gunn, next to Marco Stunt, who he said looked like a set of chairs, with each one shorter than the other. They looked like a stack of chairs. Sabian got several pin attempts, and then Penelope Ford got on the apron, took off her jacket to try and flirt with Chuck Taylor and distract him, then makes out with Kip. When Orange Cassidy then gets on the apron, he takes his jacket off to flirt, and this is when Jimmy Havoc has had enough, and he attacks Orange Cassidy after hopping the barricade and hitting him with an elevated DDT on the floor. Aubrey Edwards has her back turned. Penelope Ford hits a Rana off the top. Aubrey Edwards turns around right as Ford is exiting the ring, and Sabian gets the pinfall with the roll-up on Taylor. 10.5 minutes.
I really didn't realize that Jimmy Havoc was like a part of this stable with Kip Sabian and Penelope Ford.
They did explain on commentary that they're roommates.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So that's the sure, why not? That's as good of a reason as any.
Yeah, Jericho explained that Sabian and Penelope Ford have a nice bed, and Jimmy Havoc sleeps in a box.
What an interesting house. And that also explains why, the lack of social distancing, because, I mean, they're all living together anyway.
It was weird that he said he lives in a box, because based on the year-end BWE show, I thought he would be in a bin.
Oh, right. Yes.
That's where he was discarded.
That's right. Yes. Took me a second.
Dan Soder from Billions gave his preview. Then we heard from Ortiz and Sammy Guevara. And then our latest, I will say, squash match, Shawn Spears against Justin Law.
So if you remember, Shawn Spears lost, of course, to Cody last week. And so they not only, they replayed that match, but then they also replayed Shawn Spears' match from AEW Dark yesterday, where he beat Billy Gunn. And that led right into this. So, I mean, within the span of a week, you would have had 3 Shawn Spears matches.
That's a lot of Spears in 1 week.
Yeah.
So, this was real quick. Jericho mainly just used this to talk about how he loves Canada but hates Niagara Falls, where Spears is billed from. There was a big clothesline to Law after Law got in a little bit of offense, and then Spears cut him off C4 and won the match in 2 minutes, 20 seconds. and he is done like takeout dinner, says Jericho.
You know, it was just more matches by this point in the show. And I guess you had people there. You wanted to rack up wins for people. I guess I was just ready to see this main event by this point.
Yep. And that was the focus all show long. They announced for next week, Dustin Rhodes against Kip Sabian and Sammy Guevara versus Darby Allin. So we're getting 2 tournament matches. Kenny Omega in action, Brody Lee in action, and Jimmy Havoc against Orange Cassidy. Josh the Punk Thompson picked Jon Moxley. And then Santana comments, says Hager is undefeated in both MMA and AEW, and his mission is bringing back the AEW title to the Inner Circle. And with, I would say, about almost 40 minutes of television time remaining, Shivani and Jericho sign off, and we go to Daly's place, where Jim Ross is calling the main event solo. No holds barred AEW title match with Jon Moxley defending against Jake Hager. And
so this would have been filmed
several weeks ago.
3 weeks? 4? How many are we talking? When did they start in Georgia? It was probably 3 weeks ago they started in Georgia, right? Or 2 weeks ago they started in Georgia. So it would have been like end of March?
The last one in Jacksonville, I think, was March 25th.
Yeah, maybe something like that.
March 25th or April 1st?
No, because I believe they were in Georgia even prior to last week.
Okay, then it was March 25th. March 25th was in Georgia.
Yeah, I believe
that week like that they were taping stuff. So That's probably when this was done. And Jim Ross, I'm assuming, just called this remotely.
Yeah, I would assume so too.
So yeah, much like Mauro Ranallo at the first half of NXT, which was also done remotely from his studio. So Moxley, I thought, first of all, right off the top, I thought Jim Ross was fantastic calling this match.
I did too. Honestly, and I was honestly surprised because I wasn't really sure how he would sound. Number one, solo. Number two, calling this style of match. He sounded great. He was very knowledgeable, very much in his element, I thought, calling this very scientific MMA style of match.
Some great lines, like this is professional life and death for Moxley, and they never felt like forced lines. They wove into the story. Like I thought. Like, I really, really enjoyed this match, and Jim Ross was certainly a big part of it.
You know, like, hearing him in the lead role, calling the names of the moves, calling them the right names, too, and I think being able to, like, do everything, including, like, manning the ship, throwing to commercial, while still being able to convey storyline elements, I thought it was some of the best JR I've heard in a long time.
And this was, 4 segments, you would say? Like, this was the level of, like, what we saw with Aleister Black and Apollo Crews.
Yeah, or, Edge Orton, Gargano Ciampa, like, trust me, when
dude, this one breezed by in comparison to some of those.
Well, I mean, that would, you know, I was still honestly concerned, to be honest with you, like when I saw the clock and saw that this empty arena match was scheduled to go that long, I certainly had like flashbacks. So
they start off in the ring, and it's very much like just a wrestling / grappling fight between the two. Moxley is going for a Kimura. Then he moves to the STF, cannot apply it, and Hager just gets out, kneeing the ribs. They go to the floor. Hager's got the knee down on the belly, and then Hager goes over the guardrail, and Jim Ross asks, why do we need these here if no one is here? Calling out the guardrails, and he also did this with the chairs later on. But, I mean, Chris Jericho answered this last week.
Yeah, but why would AEW put that out there for people to use as weapons?
Well, they're masochists. They want these two to just kill one another. So here's some metal for you.
Got it.
They fought into the stands. Jon Moxley applies a figure 4 around the railing, with Ross bringing up Bret Hart, with this being shades of that. As they fight back, this is after Hager gets off the railing. The option is to suffer now and then live the rest of your life as a champion. That's what Moxley is trying to do right now. And then it's tossed into the steps. Ross is bringing up how Hager's bank account will soar with a victory tonight. And then Jon Moxley, who has had his right arm attacked throughout the match, instinctually, Ross notes, uses it for a clothesline, but ends up paying the price, where he goes down and has further injured the arm. He tries for a gotch pile driver. It gets stopped. Hager goes to the ankle lock, and Moxley quickly counters into the inside cradle, only getting a 2 count. Then Hager goes to the arm triangle. Moxley gets to the rope, and he's moxing up, and Hager yells, calling him an idiot. Back to the floor. We go through one final commercial break, and Hager gets the chair and attacks the left ankle before applying the submission hold once again. Moxley just screams, "Break my fucking ankle." He screams as he fights to the rope. Hager pulls him away, and Moxley does the roll-through counter, exiting out of the submission, and Hager flies out. Lands as Hager returns to the ring. He runs at him into a paradigm shift, and Moxley tries to turn it into a guillotine. Hager eventually staggers back to his feet, and he hits the low running knee that has become his signature, and then whips a chair. Moxley grabs the chair, whips it at Hager. The chair is on the floor, and Hager takes the paradigm shift on top of the chair. Moxley gets the pinfall victory, and they just left the camera on Moxley for like 3 minutes after this, where this guy conveyed that he went through a war in this match.
Certainly, yeah. I thought it was a good match. You know, if I had to kind of compare it to the obvious in Edge and Orton or Gargano and Ciampa, I thought this was better than those ones. I preferred this. I mean, by the end, I did feel like this one even went a little bit too long. For me, it was just like, man, the empty arena vibe really kind of takes away. But I thought this worked a lot better for me. It was a lot more dynamic in terms of like spots, in terms of offense than an Edge and Orton match. Like it had, you know, that great crown segment, which I was really impressed not only to see Hager work the style, but to see Moxley work that style. Like him doing, you know, faux MMA, like he actually talked about on Observer Live today. Talked about how he used to participate in NAGA tournaments, and how once he was released from the WWE, he wanted to really incorporate jiu-jitsu back into his life. And you can really tell because the guy moves great. So I was really happy to see that him like do that sort of style throughout the match. But then like, you know, going through, like I was able to like pinpoint and remember certain segments about this match all throughout because they were always different. You had the outside brawl, you had the New Japan kind of yay boo stuff at the end, and it was just a lot more memorable and dynamic. Hager, I thought, was also able to demonstrate his capability to go long in a main event style like this. So overall, like even without an audience, it really felt like a convincing war.
Yeah, this one did not drag for me. I enjoyed this. This was among my more favorite of these empty arena matches. I thought both worked a great match. The commentary added a ton to it as well. And more so than anything, this certainly hyped me for whenever they get to it, doing that match that they started the angle for with Jon Moxley and Zack Sabre Jr. I think that's going to be unbelievable when they do it.
Yeah, hopefully in front of an audience.
Yeah, but who knows when that'll be. But anyway, I thought the buildup was really good throughout the show. Will be interesting to see if AEW has kind of plateaued at these numbers that they've been doing these last few weeks, because this was certainly a bigger edition of Dynamite by promoting this match for several weeks and throughout the show tonight to really make this feel like a big time main event.
Yeah, I would expect so. I mean, I feel like if they stayed stable, I would consider that a disappointment.
Yeah, I mean, last week was the nail biter where it was 693 to 692 for NXT. So I would say for AEW, certainly you would hope that this increases that number.
Yeah, nothing promoted really on NXT. So
no, other than we've got Matt Riddle's makeshift partner Timothy Thatcher to look forward to. So look at that. Yeah. All right, we got some feedback. First off, the poll at forum.postwrestling.com. Tonight's AEW Dynamite got a 7.06. And starting things off is Maguire. What a crazy day. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts. Jericho on commentary is gold. The man is flat out hilarious. He sounded a little more devious and heelish this week, which is probably the right decision to go, as he's just too damn likable at times. Are you guys surprised that AEW is going ahead with Double or Nothing in May? I guess they need something for their storylines to build toward, but at this point, anything happening a month from now feels so incredibly uncertain. The main event dragged for me due to the lack of crowd noise and JR on commentary. You could hear a pin drop. It stood in stark contrast to the higher energy of the rest of the show. Why did they go this direction for the title match? Overall, the show was nothing special, but managed to get carried along by Jericho. At least they didn't fire everybody. 6 out of 10. I disagree on the main event. I thought it was a really great presentation. And I did not find the atmosphere to be a negative in this setting.
It did drag for me, mainly because I think of the lack of noise, and when you have like near falls that don't get any reaction, to me it just kind of stands out, especially if you're dragging a match up to like, you know, a 30-minute length. That's it. I mean, I thought they did the best that they could considering their desire to go 30 minutes with an empty arena match. The reason why they did it that way was because it was meant to be an empty arena match and they needed an arena to actually shoot it in. And they shot this many weeks ago. They did not shoot this in the same place that the rest of the show was shot at.
Yep.
So that was probably the reason. Are you surprised that AEW is doing Double or Nothing in May?
Surprise would not be the word, but I'm not a fan of it.
Yeah, at this point, I guess I wouldn't really be surprised. What I would be curious to know is how much of the roster takes part in that show. You know we haven't seen the Bucks, we haven't seen, you know, any of the East Coast or West Coast guys on any of these shows. Will they change that for this show? Will they get them to film matches on their tennis court to use for this event, or will it just strictly comprise the talent that we've been seeing on Dynamite?
Well, they're doing Matt and Nick Jackson on Being the Elite next week.
Yes.
Which believe me, on the list of things, like doing these matches on Being the Elite, like I don't get that at all.
I think it's really silly, honestly. Like to see them like do things like a battle royal, at a time when I
don't get it at all. I don't understand why they're continuing, like even with one match, like why they're making sure Dark is like running. I don't understand that at all.
Wrestlers want to wrestle, man. Like,
okay, dude. Like antsy. Every single person in the world right now wants to be doing many things.
Of course. Yeah. So I'm not saying it's any excuse. I'm saying this is the mindset of a wrestler. You put them together and, you know, you give them cameras and you give them an excuse to do something. They will do as much as they can. And anyway, I didn't really even watch it. I really didn't have that much interest myself. They did like 3 BTEs this week. We got Andrew from Cape Breton who says, show was fine, matches were decent, and they're presenting it like WWF superstars from back in the day. I also enjoyed some of the stuff from the Inner Circle and Taz recording some stuff from home. AEW really knows how to work in these hard times. Jericho was also great on commentary as per usual. I tried to get into their watching AEW contests as I could use a bit of the bubbly right now. As a matter of fact, I think a couple of people could use a bit of the bubbly. I haven't seen a bloodletting like this in ages with WWE. To comment on it, I think the fact that they kept constantly coming out instead of coming out in one shot made things worse, as the whole day you were thinking about who was next. Then there would be more releases. Then there could be more releases, and I'm sure people in WWE right now are having a miserable time. Hopefully things get better.
I don't disagree with that. I think you could have simply, like, make all your calls. There's no reason, like, the website has to be, the priority. And then when all those calls are made, everyone is aware, you put up one announcement, and it's not this constant refreshing, and people that have not received those calls yet, petrified of their phone ringing. I do get that.
People are going to tweet out, though. Like, inevitably, once the word of one release gets out, you're going to get that panic.
Yeah, but I mean, it's to me, people knew they were coming, but it was also, I mean, this was, at the end of the day, also driving traffic to WWE that probably was through the roof all day.
Sure, yeah.
Kenny writes, decent show tonight, but that main event was brutal. When I saw how much time was left on the show when the match started, I let out an audible, oh no. I don't understand why both companies think a street fight needs to go 30-plus minutes. It's supposed to be a wild street fight, not a long technical battle. They did an awesome job hyping up the fight and all the social media stuff, but then it was a total dud. Archer looked awesome, Penelope Ford is a star, and Sammy continues to be the best. 6 out of 10. Maybe I'm in the minority here, Way.
It was a big match, and really, if you cut out the commercials, I think it really was, maybe 20, low 20s, maybe?
Probably.
They like, in the end here, they are trying to fill content, okay, with, number one, having your stars on screen in a big match, but secondly, to try to be economical, I suppose, with the amount of time that they have to even film things. So, I guess that's why. Nick from Lansing says, exhausting day. It was a fun show and made for a good distraction. As soon as he's done with Matt Hardy, Chris Jericho should clearly head into a feud with Orange Cassidy.
They'll do a match at some point. I'm sure Jericho would like to do a match with him at some point.
Do you expect to see Matt Hardy, I guess, in the arena anytime?
I mean, Rebby Hardy has made it pretty clear she is not a fan of that idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess that nothing was really made of that challenge, to the Hardy Compound Challenge.
I mean, in theory, that would be, to me, what you would want to do at Double or Nothing is Jericho and Matt Hardy doing the on-location shoot.
Right.
And maybe that's possible that, they could do that at Hardy's compound and shoot it there.
I mean, if Rebby would even be cool with that.
Yeah, I mean, and she has every right to be concerned, so that's completely justifiable. Trent writes, I'll focus my feedback on the main event. I've generally been a defender of Jim Ross, while my friends have criticized him in recent years, but I found his work in tonight's match lackluster. I think it was a mistake to have him call the match solo. He needs someone to work off of. I also had a huge problem with the officiating. The referee was enforcing rope breaks while they were in the ring, but apparently falls counted anywhere on the outside, as he was asking Hager if he wanted to submit to the figure 4 around the pole. Typically what that is that for falls count anywhere, it's what's always been like the rope is still considered like outside of the structure, that they still break it. I didn't even notice the submission attempts on the floor. So,
well, the figure 4.
Yeah, but was he asking him if he was submitting?
I don't recall.
Anyway, the low blow spot made the ref made a point of saying it was legal because it was to the inner thigh. The match was no holds barred. It makes no difference where the shot landed. I know it's been said many times, but these refs have to figure out what the rules are.
I mean, I think those are valid criticisms. I honestly wasn't even paying such close attention, so could be right. We got a Noah from Vaughn who says, very tough day with all the news. The Drake Maverick video he posted was just gut-wrenching. I hope all those affected are able to bounce back on their feet as soon as possible, and once this subsides, I hope they are welcome back to the WWE. On to Dynamite, I thought it was a fine show. Nothing great, but nothing bad. Britt's video was fantastic. Hager and Mox was a tad slow, but was definitely a different style of match compared to most AEW matches. I thought the commercials really broke up the flow of it. 7 out of 10 show, but I don't believe April 15, 2020 will be remembered in the wrestling world for this.
No, that's certainly the case. Alexander from Portland, is there any better bromance in pro wrestling right now than Chris Jericho and Sammy Guevara? I hope these guys stick together for a while. Hager and Moxley was not nearly as good as the build was, but for a television feud, it was pretty successful. Considering which guys were and weren't in attendance for the month or two of tapings done recently, who do you think will become the number one contender for Jon Moxley? If we're going by win-loss record, I think it'll be tough to keep Omega out of contendership, but I can't see AEW having such a big match happen in an empty arena environment. I don't think it has anything to do with the environment. It has to do that we have to sell a pay-per-view. So if they're running this pay-per-view, it makes all the sense in the world to do as big a match as possible, if not larger matches than you might have planned for this, because the whole point of this is getting people to buy this pay-per-view, or else this pay-per-view makes even less sense if you're not even stacking it to make money off of.
And who do you think that would be? Who are the candidates for Moxley?
Well, I think it ultimately comes down to who is going to be available to this show. We don't know the location. Where is this going to be? That's going to affect who can even be in attendance at this show. If we're looking at just this crew, I don't know if I'm dying to see a pay-per-view with just this roster.
Mm-hmm.
And then your options, it can't be Cody for storyline purposes. You would have the finals of the TNT Championship, and then that leaves you with Moxley with Kenny Omega, with Jericho. Which they just did. And you would think that, Jericho is kind of earmarked now for Matt Hardy, but I mean, all of this is up in the air of where you can go here.
Yeah. I mean, the rest of the guys are kind of taken up. I mean, we're presuming Archer will be in the tournament finals, maybe with Cody. And that kind of leaves guys like Sean Spears, who just lost in the first round of the tournament. Wouldn't really make sense there. Could it be Sammy Guevara? Could it be Darby Allin?
Darby Allin. We haven't seen Pentagon and Phoenix on these shows.
A lot of guys we haven't seen.
Yeah. As you're just going through them. I mean, it's not, if this is the roster you have to pick from, it's like, it really comes down to like your key ones are Moxley, Jericho, Cody would be featured prominently, but for storyline purposes, not going for the title right now. Yeah.
Okay, we got a Gerard who says, apart from Colt versus Archer, this was the weakest empty arena Dynamite thus far. And for a company that seems willing to learn from their mistakes, I was very surprised how long they let Moxley versus Hager go. The Dustin versus Hager match at Revolution was the worst match on that show and should have been a big signal for them to keep Hager matches shorter. I am honestly surprised, I think, by some of the negative reaction to the match. Like, I overall enjoyed the match and felt like it was to me, the best attempt I've seen at a 30-minute empty arena match that we've seen recently. At the same time, maybe that was the problem itself, the fact that it was such a long match. Yeah,
I really enjoyed it. I got into the match. I liked it quite a lot. So anyway, maybe you and I enjoyed it more than most out there. But we appreciate everyone's opinions regardless. So thank you for tuning into the show. We are going to be back Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern time for the Cafe Hangout. Brandon Thurston from WrestleNomics is going to be joining us, and we will chat with him about all the latest and kind of the financial picture of WWE 1 week away from their next quarterly investors call, which once they're doing it next week, it's a 5 p.m. call.
Yeah, so we won't be able to cover it on the Hangout, but we'll certainly be talking about it through our coverage either way.
All right. So we'll chat with you on the Hangout. We will be opening it up to phone calls as well. So we hope you will join us. All members of the Post Wrestling Cafe can tune into that one at 3 o'clock Eastern. And also want to give a mention to the Starrcade review that we just put up on Tuesday night. I really enjoyed this review quite a lot. We spent 2.5 hours chatting about Starrcade 83, featuring Ric Flair challenging Harley Race for the NWA title, and was a great look at this era of history.
John put a great deal of time into his research for the show, and I was really happy with the way everything turned out too. So do listen to it. And I also want to give some plugs this weekend. Of course, we have the British Wrestling Experience coming up on Friday. The latest edition of the Rocky Maivia Picture Show is out on Saturday on our free feeds. And yes, it will be our man Neil who will be joining Nate Milton as they talk about Journey to
the Mysterious Island.
Journey 2. And as I mentioned on Monday, the big premiere of the brand new Rocky Maivia Picture Show t-shirt will also be released on Saturday at store.postwrestling.com. This thing is amazing. I think it'll be the hottest fashion item of the year. It'll be the Tiger King of wrestling t-shirts. And that'll premiere Saturday concurrently with the release of this episode of the Rocky Maivia Picture Show. And then on Sunday, it is the final edition of Thunderstruck.
Yes, I've got to follow Wai Ting, which I listened to the show, and then we get to the end, and all of a sudden you're talking about, like, it was just a mind fuck where you're talking about, like, our upcoming Q&A in Tampa, and I was like, when the hell did he tape this? Dude, I haven't even done the show yet, and it's coming out on Sunday.
Well, so, I obviously I taped it before everything went down.
It was so bizarre to hear, like, obviously it's going to happen, like, you tape stuff, but just to hear you talking about that, and it's like, part of me is like, God, what this version of Wai is about to live through is crazy. Like, I can't even imagine being back at that, like, 6 weeks ago.
It wasn't even that long ago that
I know, but it's like, you feel like, imagine where we were as like us personally, like where we, not like in Japan that had already gone through it, but just where our lives were 7 weeks ago.
I taped that on February 21st.
Oh my God. Okay. So this was like 2 months ago.
But that wasn't even that long ago. Honestly, like my HVAC filter, I'm just looking at my schedule. My HVAC filter isn't even that old. So my Brita filter isn't even that old, John. This is how I calculate time.
Well, it feels even way longer before that when Jushin Thunder Liger retired back on January the 5th with his final match, and then following day at New Year Dash with the retirement ceremony. WH and I will chat about the 2 matches from Wrestle Kingdom that weekend, followed by the retirement ceremony at Oda Ward Gymnasium, and we were there for all 3 of those shows. So that's going to be coming up on Sunday, the series finale of Thunderstruck, where Jushin Thunder Liger, his career officially comes to an end at Post Wrestling.
Big week as always here. The news never ends. So, who knows what'll happen tomorrow.
All right. Thanks to everyone for checking out the show tonight. We appreciate it. We'll speak with you on Thursday with the Hangout.